little bit more.
We're going to do a duet.
Yes. Okay.
Sunny in chair.
Okay, welcome. Nice to see so many of you, despite the rescheduling we had to do.
I got stuck in Frankfurt. There was like some storm and it didn't go according to plan.
Well, but we managed.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And welcome. This is the first part of an event series curated by OTO Electronics and Proton, where we focus on the relationship between music and technology in the electronic music community. And today we have invited Tony to talk about his experience with performing electronic music live, improvisation and so on. And he's gonna do a short demonstration. And we're gonna maybe let's see. We put it all up.
Yeah.
So why not? And we're so happy to have you here, Tony.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking me to come and talk to people.
And let's just start with saying that I guess our relation is that you bought the sequencer that we are building and are using it in your live set.
Yeah. So for a long time I used like a BeatStep Pro, and I've always been like on the lookout for alternatives to that. Maybe I saw it like on YouTube or something. I can't actually remember where I first saw it, but it looked really interesting. The rhythms, oh god, I can't remember what it's called.
Euclidean rhythms.
Exactly, I really like playing with Euclidean rhythms, and so I think maybe I was really lucky to get in with the second batch of them. I think the first batch, the Kickstarter ones, had already gone out, so I got it. And I really liked it, and we were kind of just communicating via like Instagram messages or something like that, and giving you feedback about it.
Yeah.
But when was that?
That's we released the sequencer half a year ago now. So it's nice to see that you already managed to like integrate it into the set. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. I mean, the other thing is that I guess the gear I use for my live set changes a lot, just depending on different ideas and stuff like that. For a long time, I used a lot of Eurorack, but that has advantages and disadvantages. But I keep I like to keep changing it. As I get new ideas about how to use different bits of gear together. But the funny thing about this setup was I've only actually played live with it twice, because a lot of it I got before the pandemic stopped everything. So it's like a whole new set of gear for me to learn, because I mean, listening to it at this kind of volume is completely different than over a loud sound system, and everything behaves in a really different way. I mean, in terms of the oscillators and stuff like that. So some things you think are going to work great at home, you try it live and you just can't hear it.
Yeah. Let's talk more about this, because this is actually very interesting for us. We've discussed a lot when developing T1. This like the relation between what happens in the studio and what happens on stage, and how can you translate what you do in the studio to what you do on stage. And it would be interesting to hear from you if how do you work with music? Is it do you start in this, like, do you make music for the release and then convert it to like a live performance friendly format, or is it the other way around?
I think they're largely quite separate things for me, where I design a setup and a set that's very specifically made for a live setting because of the sound level, the physicality of that. If it's a techno set that we're talking about, but I find that techniques I learn from that and things I find interesting, they find their way into the studio, into the productions, but for some reason I see them as separate things. I design, specifically a live setup, which this is the current one that I'm using. But I know other producers who kind of road test stuff live and then end up making that into a track. But so far that hasn't happened for me. I've tried to use techniques from studio work in live stuff. Sometimes it translates, sometimes not. But it's all, there's a great deal of trial and error for me. And, I'm fortunate to be able to perform live quite often, to try stuff out. Basically every gig is trying something different out and just seeing how it works.
Yeah, because following you, I see that it's like, it seems like your setup is constantly mutating. You're very like embracing new music technology, and do you have some piece of gear that like follows you, have followed you for a long time, or?
I don't know. Well, I mean, pretty much all of this is quite new for me in the last sort of year or so. I don't know. I think different pieces come in and appear and disappear.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other thing for me, I really have to consider about being able to travel with the gear. I mean, if I have to fly somewhere to perform live, I would much prefer to be able to carry it, in like so all of this fits in like a small wheelie case that I can sort of basically sneak on the plane and hope they don't weigh it, because it's way over the weight, But I have performed where I've checked stuff in a Peli case, but that's a bit more nerve-wracking because people like to throw those about. I mean, so in a way, it's quite a good restriction to have. Working with restrictions is good because, like I said, whatever my setup is, it has to fit in some sort of hand luggage situation, and that's good because it stops me wanting to bring too much gear. Because when I perform live, I really need to be in control of my setup, and so kind of stripping it down is really good, because something really important to consider is when you're at home in your studio, you're in a very controlled situation with the sound, with your state of mind, literally. But when you perform live, it's going to sound weird. You can't hear everything. You're nervous. You've got like nervous energy, all of these things, and that just messes you up. If you've designed something that's too complicated, you're going to have a horrible time. Well, I would, because if you're panicking, it's not an ideal state to be in, especially if you're improvising. So I really try to not get carried away and keep adding more and more gear, and really try and use it in quite a simple way, really. I find is more effective. But I mean, maybe that's because I'm generally taking quite a minimalist approach to the music, so I don't know, that might not apply to every single style, but that's how kind of how I approach it.
Yeah. So designing this minimalistic setup, what are like the key elements in what do you need? Like, for instance, we could look at your setup here and.
Well, this is a setup for like a techno live set, so the bass drum is an important thing in that, and a lot of stuff kind of sits around that. and yeah, basically drums and some other stuff. That's techno.
Yeah.
And so yeah, with the Pulsar, I mean, it's so weird how, you know, I was setting it up here and it just sounds like, you know, but when you hear it on a sound system, it's gonna absolutely crush you.
Yeah.
But in you know, in a crushing you in a well-rounded way, not in an unpleasant way, a pleasant crushing.
Yeah.
And then I mean, it basically has 4 voices, so the bass drum and a bass line, and then a kind of clap or snare, and then some hi-hats, and then I use I have the little sampler here, and that's just giving me some other, like a different type of kick drum and another type of hi-hat and some other percussion, and then just some kind of pads and stuff like that. And then the mono is just like just basically mono sequences, but everything is being fed through the OTO BOUM, which is a like compressor, kind of distortion compressor.
Is it like an end of chain thing in this?
Yeah,
setup?
so basically I'm trying to have quite a sonically minimal setup, but it's being kind of quite squashed, and I'm using the kick drum to kind of squash everything around it. So that's the way this system works. I mean, I haven't always done it that way.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
And so nothing here is like backtrack or prepared.
No, well, I mean, I have in the T1 I have a lot of sequences programmed. I also have some stuff programmed in the mono synth, but they're really just like simple foundations to work from, really.
Nice. Maybe we should like take a listen to some of the to your setup.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, I hope that at least some of you are going to be able to hear it later on, and it'll be the different. You'll notice the difference in the sound, like at this level and loud.
Yeah.
So, strange playing playing really quiet like that. It's definitely it's definitely a setup. Like I say, it's designed for that really high volume, physical kind of moving lots of air sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing I noticed doing that, I basically program a whole load of different patterns and sequences that are basically in the same key or could hopefully make kind of some sort of musically coherent sense when I mix them together, and I sort of pick and mix different parts of it and modulate them, and hopefully they kind of make some sort of sense. But I don't really have a specific drum pattern goes with sequence, goes with sample kind of idea, but I try to design something that isn't going to clash really badly when I put anything with anything, really, and sort of gives me a lot of flexibility. And it's nice when I'm performing, you know, if I feel like if something feels really good at the time and the people catch on to it, then I can kind of keep working with that. And it's just I really enjoy the improvisational aspect of live performance. That's something that's sort of, you know, you asked about if a piece of gear has been at the core of what I've done, and I would say it's more about the idea of improvising has been at the core, rather than a specific piece of gear.
That's interesting because it's like to do improvisation, I guess you have to build up some kind of like intimate knowledge with like your instruments, and it's fascinating how you can keep on doing these sets and have like the signature of your sound, but still like changing the instruments you use. Like, do you feel there, like introducing a new instrument to your setup, is there a learning curve? Do you like how long do you need to spend with it to actually be able to improvise?
Yeah, I guess each piece of gear does have a learning curve, and it depends on, like I said before, I really don't know until I've used it live how is this going to work or not. I don't know. I think there's some sort of deeper idea of improvisation that I'm always working on, and that for me, it's great to have something that's like it's like, I think of it as an ongoing practice. It's something, there's also tying in with that. I realize that some people have an idea that they're searching for this perfect live setup. But to me, that's something that never exists. It's a constant, like, you add something and take something away, and each thing has an advantage and a disadvantage. So I'm never searching for the perfect setup, because it's an ongoing practice, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy something that goes well and something that doesn't go so well. It's all sort of part of this process that I really enjoy.
It gives it some nerve as well, that it's that you know that it's not on like it's not how should I formulate this, it can go wrong as well.
Yeah, I think things going wrong is an important part of it, and I mean, if I aimed to do a perfect live set, then if you take that all away, then you would just play back a WAV file, you know. But for me, that's not what I want to do. It's really boring, and it has no connection with the people and the here and the now, and that's where the real magic happens. And I'm convinced from doing a lot of live performances as well as DJing that regardless of whether people understand technically what's happening, that's beside the point, but people can sense when something's being created here and now, and it's very, very different from how they react to pre-recorded music from a DJ set, which can also be powerful, but there's something really, really special when people sense the music's being created now. And I think a roughness and imperfection is part of that. And I think that when an audience hears you performing and you're working hard and you're making some little mistakes, you kind of enter into a sort of a weird bargain, like a risk and excitement with the audience. And I think that creates a really special power. And that's part of what I'm exploring with the improvisation, where I haven't laid it all out beforehand. That creates an energy, a live energy, and that's a big part of what I'm exploring with this. Yeah.
Let me just...
Could you turn off the...
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
That's better.
I'm just gonna... You said, you told us at a point, you said that T1 was the sequencer you had been waiting for somebody to make.
Yeah.
It was interesting because it sounded like you were like really knowing what kind of instruments you were looking for to be made, but is it always like this, or do you sometimes just get a new instrument for
no, I don't. I
or?
mean, it's certainly not as if I had all these ideas before I got the T1, but how do I put it? I mean, for a while I was using Eurorack, and I was using a lot of the sequencing in the Eurorack. And again, back to that thing about traveling with the gear, I would just take one case, and it's like, okay, I'm using up a lot of space in my rack for all this sequencing. If I move the sequencing out of the rack and use like a BeatStep Pro, then that gives me more room for more effects and oscillators and whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I just it was just keeping my eye open about what was out there, and I saw all these different sequences, and not, still I hadn't found anything to work better for what I wanted than the BeatStep Pro, and it was just the way that I could kind of use this in a similar way. If I want, I can program it like that, but I just there are just a lot of like smart touches with it, to do with like we were talking about how I can very easily mute and unmute stuff one-handed, and that's so important because I can be working a filter or something like that with my other hand, and the Euclidean rhythms and the more kind of musical variations, and the way that the kind of random functions on it, they're done in a very musical way as well, because often random chants on sequences is just weird and robotic, really. Not very musical, but I mean, this just seems more musical, and it's a little smaller than the BeatStep Pro as well.
The ability to lock in to lock the random in loops, and so it's not constantly changing. Yeah.
I mean, I'm still really learning it. There's a lot to go into there, and I also had a lot of ideas how I can use it for studio production as well, because I like the way the musical changes that I can sort of program with it as well.
So is randomness something that you would usually incorporate in live sets? I guess that's also, it can be a tricky...
Yeah, it's a weird one. When I first started using the Eurorack gear to do live techno, I was really enjoying all these like random generators and things like that. But what I realized was, I realized that there's a very fundamental part of techno, which is this idea of the loop and having something repeating, but filtering or oscillating or something. And then when you have too much randomness in there, it's surprising how much it throws off a crowd. They, but you know, it's good to know that and play with that. But what I found worked really well with the Eurorack setup was feeding it into a looper, and that was a great way of having a consistency to it, but adding other elements that would repeat themselves. But this system does not have a looper. But I mean, I guess I'm using more simple and repeating sequences from the T1. I mean, I think the hi-hats and some other things have some randomness to it, but I'm experimenting with how much creates something interesting rather than throwing people off.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, this is specifically a sort of raw techno setup, and when you come into more experimental live setups, of course, the boundaries, if there are any, are very different.
So you would have another setup for instance, playing as Anthony Child or in the Transcendence Orchestra?
Yeah, usually a completely different setup. Like often the SOMA Lyra 8 I've used quite a lot is really fantastic live. That's definitely something that really I think Michael's heard it actually. It really transforms. It's a beast live, really. But and I use loopers and other delay effects and pitch shifters and stuff like that. So yeah, it's basically it's a totally different setup for that.
I was wondering if when we were designing this sequence, we also found a lot of the times that working with like only the sequencer instead of like making a product that has sound generation and sequencing, it's this. It becomes tricky because when you replace the sound source, suddenly you replace like it's a new identity, it's a new track. How do you like in this setup? Do you find is this a difficulty that you have the sequencing and the sound source separated in this way?
I don't.
Do you understand where I'm?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean,
it's like thinking about like an acoustic instrument where like the playing interaction and the like how you set notes and the sound generation itself is like one big unity. But here we have like when you like take them apart, it could be like difficult to reproduce the same material again, even with like some saved sequences on the sequencer.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely turns out differently every time, but that's an important part of it. I mean, there's also a balance between the regularity of what the sequencer is telling the gear to do, but there's a lot of range of variation in what I'm manually modulating everything. So I guess, you know, for the techno live setup, it's that balance between the solid repetitious elements which the sequencer is giving me, and then the modulation and the effects and stuff that I'm doing. But I mean, I've played around with it where I'm using the T1 to trigger samples in the Blackbox sampler or other kind of more less like straightforward monosynth kind of gear, and that's been a lot of fun. I mean, that works in a different way again. I don't know if that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying.
Also, if you just Mark, if you have any questions, we'll just take them along the way.
Oh, hello.
Actually, regarding to the question you asked before about having a system where you can sort of like take a piece in and out, I was wondering, because you all feed it into the OTO BOUM, and one of the things that I recently have loved discovering is when there's a sort of saturation going on, and two or more sound sources feed into the same machine, they will start coloring each other. How important does that affect how you set up your system? How well that the way they color each other, or?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I have the mono synth going into the Pulsar, so I can run it through its effects as well. So yeah, this setup is definitely, it's like everything's being funneled in this huge pipe into the OTO BOUM. But I mean, I remember that from like techno productions with very heavy compression. It's like, or for me, it works best with very few minimal sounds and sort of really smashing them with the compressor. But yeah, like you say, I mean, working this way, every sound affects every other sound. So I have to be really careful how, if I turn up the bass line too high, it's gonna just squash the kick drum out of the way, and I have to be careful how I balance the things. But it's just like another way of working, I guess, and it has different advantages, disadvantages, and rules and things like that. But I mean, it's really fun exploring a different, that different sort of way of working, and just seeing what you like and what you don't like about it. So yeah.
I remember the last time when you played a live set, you played that ambient set in that church.
Yeah.
And I believe you had a booklet of music easily.
Yeah.
I never tried it, don't know how it works and how it is with CV, but have you tried combining that one with the T1?
Not so far actually. I've only really, like MIDI wise, I've only really clocked its arpeggiator to sort of feed into a looper. But I guess the T1 is working with like Eurorack.
One per one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 1.2.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm sure I could use it with a converter, but
And it's on the roadmap as well.
okay.
Scaling
Good.
for
Yeah. Is that something that you could do with firmware?
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah, it's just like a different calibration curve.
I believe that this thing module has a book layer compatibilities
Okay.
with 1.2.
Yeah. But yeah, with some clever firmware. Yeah, but I mean, with those kind of performances, with the booklet and stuff like that, I really enjoy. I like using it with a looper, and kind of feeding very manually played parts into the looper, and that gives it the kind of repetition.
You had the electroharmonics.
Yeah. Like it's like either 4 mono or two stereo loopers. I think there's a new looper kind of drifting memory station that SOMA are doing, and that's pretty weird, unsurprisingly. Yeah, it's SOMA gear.
It looks really cool. How it's not supposed to be necessarily a looper to do quantized loops, but more like this ambient drifting,
a kind of mangler, granular mangler thing.
Yeah. It sounds like you have been using Eurorack a lot for live sessions, but have been transcending towards a more like, looking at this, it looks like more intuitive interfaces, and at least not so much menu diving. And is this a trend in your approach?
I personally don't really like a whole lot of menu diving, but recently in place of the mono synth in the front, I made like a tiny, I don't know, whatever that size is, Eurorack case, just with a Turing machine sequencer and just an oscillator and I think an Optimix thing, just for like a little self-contained synth, and I can clock it with the Pulsar, just as an idea to almost like make a little, to me a lot of this is like this kind of desktop synth kind of size gear, but I find it, I really enjoy using kind of self-contained bits of gear that have got some clever design in there, and just seeing how they work with each other. To me, it's a very different way from making a Eurorack case. But one isn't necessarily better than the other. It's just they're just different ways of working, and this is just what I'm kind of doing at the moment. But I'm sure I'll dig out the Eurorack stuff again, because it really frightens people at the airport security check. They think it's like a nuclear bomb or something.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. How many voices or elements can the T1 sequence at once?
Do you
Yeah,
know the answer?
Well,
I don't know.
It can sequence. So it has a MIDI interface where it can sequence 16 channels, and then but the T1 has 16 tracks, and each of them can be polyphonic, up to 8 voices. So it's like in MIDI there's more than enough. Analog, like CV, the CV interface, you have 2 voices, full voices, with a full voice being a gate, and 2 CVs for velocity and pitch. But you can configure that to 3 voices with only pitch.
Oh, hello.
You were talking about the kind of the excitement by improvising live. Have you gotten used to the excitement before improvising, before playing a gig, that you're not like crapping yourself before you go on stage? Is that you're comfortable with the danger?
Yeah, I think I am aware that if I wouldn't have liked to approach it in this way a long time ago. I think with the experience of playing for a long time, that makes me more brave and stupid in that kind of way. I don't know. I guess there has to be a level of confidence and comfort in the gear and the idea of performing, and that for sure helps. But I mean, I still have there's this. Before I play, every time there's a nervous energy and that kind of thing. But if I was so nervous, I would have to make my setup even more simple, maybe. But I mean, that nervous energy feeds into it for sure. And actually, something I have to really check myself with when I start. I've got these nerves beforehand. And the tendency is to rush through everything too quick. And I don't give the audience a chance to get into the groove of what I'm doing. So I have to really consciously slow myself down and be aware that my perception of the passage of time is very different from the audience. So I have to watch that.
And oftentimes it can be the other way around also, right? Having like getting stuck in something, a small experiment with a voice and dragging it on for too long.
Yeah, I think that seems to be a sort of a common complaint with modular live sets. But I think I think that experience as a DJ helps with pacing and change and being able to keep things moving, you know, and that idea of having an element which is more continuous and other parts which are changing, so it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, definitely getting stuck in the wibble zone is not is not ideal, and that. But yeah, I think it's, you know, there's a part. You know, a lot of my concentration is on the gear, but I also have. There's almost a part of me floating outside, which is going, "Hey, come on! It hasn't changed for a while." So I have to keep an awareness of the audience. They're a big part of that feedback loop.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. So that's why I have to keep it simple, because, you know, I can't deal with all this stuff all at once.
No. Maybe also the fact that you do a lot of improvisation is like, then it's new material to you and to the audience, so you have kind of the same perception of time. Maybe you.
Yeah, I still think it's quite different to be an active performer and an observing audience. I think the way that you perceive time is quite different, I think. I reckon.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Hi. I would like to ask, what did Corona and being stuck at home or in your studio or wherever, what did that mean for you? Because you speak of this improvisation and the live being so important, and then what did it mean for you?
Yeah, I mean that was that was something that was really difficult because of having so many years of traveling and meeting people and playing live to audiences. You know, that all stopped for the first time. But something that was quite good was this. There was a system that Speedy J, Joachim Papp, his sort of crew discovered this thing called Ninjam. That was a way of people remotely performing and having a MIDI and audio connection. But it's basically, I think, you hear each other like 2 bars out of sync, but you're in the grid. So it's fantastic. And we did some jams with Joachim and then some other friends in London, and it was amazing how quickly that distance seemed to sort of evaporate. And you know, so you've got the audio, but we'd also have like a camera, so you could look and see what they're doing, you know, and that was really useful at that time.
I think I saw all of them. They're like 4 hours each or something.
Yeah, probably. Well, yeah. If it's anything to do with Joachim, then it's definitely like 4 hours long or something. He's the marathon set man. I'm tired now. Yeah.
Yeah, following up on that question, did your musical output change during Corona, as like did your interest in music as you could not play live?
I mean, I wasn't like one of these people who was churning out like 10 albums or something. I mean, music creation, music production is like really relating to my state of mind. So I wasn't in a creative state of mind really at all. So I'm really happy. You know, it's the thing that I enjoy the most, to travel and meet people and perform and just feel that feedback. You know, that's a really special and deep kind of communication. That's like the best thing there is to me.
I'm curious, when you make this kind of set that's very compressor squashed, you said something about like sculpting things around your kick drum. Do you have the kind of sidechain functionality in your OTO compressor, or do you have to like all the time be aware to not put stuff on top of each other?
Yeah, I believe that this does have some kind of, there is like a sidechain input, but I tried it out, and to be honest, it worked. I find it better to just mix it live. I mean, if you heard the mix without the compressor, the kick drum would be much louder, but the Otto pulls it back down, but pulls everything around it. So I did try the sidechain, but I preferred live mixing it.
So does that involve a lot of attention on not putting stuff on top of the kick?
It's mostly about the relative balance. I found from playing. I mean, I spent I think maybe some time ago. I spent 3 years only performing live with the Eurorack. I kind of stopped DJing for a few years just to really focus on that. And I think I learned so much about how important the level, volume, balance of the elements is. You can, just by changing the balance, you can create, of the same sounds and sequence, you can change the feeling of it and the impact of it so much. And I think what I learned from that ended up coming back into the way that I approach DJing now. I do that in quite a different way, paying much more attention to the levels. So yeah, I'm really paying attention to the levels. That's something that's really, really important. And it can make the same thing sound great or terrible if I get it right or wrong.
But you would need to try it out to hear if it's right or wrong,
Yeah,
because you have no cueing in this setup.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, the same with the Eurorack stuff. I never used cueing. It was always about bring it in and let's make it work. You know, and yeah, there's always a way. There's always a way of doing that. It's like maybe it's like a stubbornness that I have. It's like I'm going to make it work. And through repetition, if something comes in and it sounds terrible, if you just leave it going, it's like people, oh yeah, this is pretty good. So that's a special secret tip that maybe I shouldn't have said. But there you go.
That's also the way to use randomness. Maybe a stupid random melody repeated many times can suddenly be
exactly. I find I'm really interested in the psychology of that kind of stuff. It's pretty. I find it quite interesting what works and what doesn't work. Like I said about having too much randomness. Techno audience doesn't like too much randomness. But play to an Ortega crowd, maybe that's a bit better.
I don't know what this crowd is, but I think we should round off if we. Yeah.
One more question. Do you think about how to make your kick drum change throughout your live set to keep it interesting, or do you have like different modules? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the kick drum on the Pulsar, I have like a 10 volt. I have a 10 volt output coming to a potentiometer, I think that is, and then going to the tune. What's it called? The tuning amount, and so I can. It's like a CV that I'm giving it, and that lets me, because the main tune knob of the kick is so vast. I've tried it, and you just notch it a tiny little bit just to tune it, but I can tune the kick quite easily. I can obviously affect the decay, and there's also what's it called? Oh, there's something called pitch, which adds like a little blip at the start to give it a kind of a knock, and when I take that out, it's more like an 808 sort of kick. So surprisingly, I can get quite a variety out of with those things. And again, this is something that I really realise when I'm playing live at a high volume, which I can't really tell in my studio. It's the range doesn't sound as big in my studio, but when I used it live, I realised. But I also have a sample on the Blackbox sampler, just a quite high 909 kick. I like to use like a straight kick and an offbeat kick and mixing between them and stuff like that. So that's how I get my kick variation.
And is that changing a lot throughout the live set? Or?
Yeah, I'm tweaking it.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice to, when I drop something else in, I can change the pitch of the kick at the same time, and just to give it a sense that it's like moved on or changed. But yeah, there's a lot of tweakability there. Yeah.
Do you use any of the cool, elegant, generative features of this fantastic new sequencer?
Oh yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to tell us about that.
No, but for techno, it's a little bit like, right? Like if it's too generative, you're almost like, oh, I'm frightened of this. It's like evolving and stuff. It's like, can I get it static again?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said earlier how I initially bought this sequencer to, you know, for this type of setup, a live setup, you know, nothing too fancy, generative, whatever, but in learning it, I've seen a lot of other ways that I can use it, the more generative kind of and random side of things. So yeah, that's something I'm gonna have to spend some time delving into.
I just remember from your Snyder's session that you were talking about a lot about the Turing machine, about like this, but it was also quite new at that time. I think it was like maybe 16 or something, like 17, and like this whole like random monster.
Yeah, I mean the Turing machine worked really well but what I found was great with the Turing machine when I fed the CVs that was spitting out into a pitch quantizer, and so that would pull it into a particular scale, and that would make more sense out of it if I wanted that. But also the way that you can it can be randomizing, and then you lock it off and it just repeats. So that's you know, but that was a great way of generating random sequences, but that are in a particular scale. So that kind of made it techno enough.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
You're talking about the like the techno crowd, and they don't like too much change. How much, when you play live, how much do you think of you want to challenge the crowd, and how much are you playing to them, and how much are you saying this is what I want to do, and this is what you're gonna get?
Yeah, it's well, that's a fun balance for sure, and I think I like playing around with this sort of equation about and it's what I actually like the most about techno is the amount that I can stretch it and warp it and pull it around, and it's, to me, it's still techno, and it's fun to just see how far do you go before you break it, you know. And it depends on the crowd, and definitely for me it's important to stretch a crowd and just to see how far they're going to go, and but it just depends on kind of my mood and their mood. It's just like a feedback kind of thing. But I mean, to me, this setup is simple, but it has a flexibility. It can go into some like crazy nonsense, you know, and it's fun to kind of draw it back from that as well.
Well, I think we should round off then. Thank you so much for...
Yeah, thanks for
Mike,
coming.
thank you so much.